Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. This episode is part of our Bookseller Lightning Talk series, in which booksellers present short talks on tech tools, organizational strategies, communication methods, or innovations they've made in their stores.
My name's Nat. I work at Chevalier's Books in Los Angeles. I've been bookselling for 5 years now, and I currently manage the store. We're LA's oldest indie bookstore, which is our big claim to fame. This last fall, we did a big books to prisons program. We did a GoFundMe drive for the entire month of November. And then we used all of those proceeds to buy books new from our store and to ship them out to prisons that we had partnered with across the country. I think there's kind of two sides to this. There's the general donation drive logistics, and then there's the specifics to prisons issues. So in general, for our marketing, it was just signs everywhere, social posts all the time. I felt like I was bothering people, but every time we would post something, people would engage. We would get people, we just had a little sign on our door. We would get people coming in and be like, hey, like I was incarcerated for 20 years and now I run a arts program with inmates. How can I help? And so just having visibility was a huge part in partnering. And I guess I should say the inspiration came just as a personal passion of mine. My two oldest brothers were in and out of the carceral system in California my whole life, and my oldest brother spent 17 years in a California prison. Books were a huge part of connecting with him growing up. And I was like, earlier this past summer, I was like, hey, I work at a bookstore and prisons need books. I think I could probably make something happen here. And the education side was huge. So that started with teaching booksellers. So at our regular staff meeting, talking personally about, what it meant to me, and then, giving everyone numbers and what it would look like so that they felt empowered to talk to customers and be able to speak more to the program. Talking to reps. So during all of my frontlist buys, I would just kind of mention that we were doing this to our reps, and everyone was so excited and would be like, oh, I can make a backlist catalog on Edelweiss and send it to you for books on mass incarceration or social justice. Teaching customers. So we had a series of infographics that we would share in our socials, but then also curated a big selection of books on incarceration, policing, and had that in the store the whole month. And then the wider community was, we had a corresponding panel discussion event. So our fundraiser ran for the month of November. Right in the middle of that, we had a group of speakers, a social worker who works with the libraries to get books into LA jails. We had a formerly incarcerated writer. We had Christopher Soto, who curates the Queer Poets of Color poetry journal, and he works with detention centers specifically. And we had the director of Words Uncaged, who publishes works by writers currently incarcerated and or on death row. And that was a really incredible turnout. Our events are always a good time, but this one, it just really felt like we were bringing people together to do something. And the people who were coming at it from all different angles, it was a really, really heartwarming event. As far as the actual execution and making it happen, a lot of networking, just cold emailing, prison librarians, being very persistent, I stumbled upon a massive kind of email thread of jail librarians across the country and put out a call. People are just, they need books. And so this is something that just everyone wants to help in whatever way they can. It was a lot of work, of course, but documenting it along the way and being able to update as we wrapped up booksellers, our community, and our contributors on GoFundMe with updates and thank yous was really big. And we're still getting people now who are excited and still want to get involved. We are in Larchmont Village near Hollywood, which is a very kind of like the East Village, but in LA. It's very tight knit. We have a few different like local newspapers, and we reached out to them, and they were really happy to promote this with ads and articles on their website. And so getting that out to the kind of broader news network was important. So that's the general, just running a donation drive. The more specifics of sending these out to prisons, there are a lot of restrictions. The majority of facilities, the books can only be new, only be paperback, and generally nothing explicit, but that really varies. It can be frustrating because a lot of time it's just one person who's just the arbiter of what can and can't be let in. And it feels completely random, and you just have to remind yourself that any books getting into these facilities is a win, and is a step in the right direction. There were like I said, a lot of people who this is their life's work, and they are just abundant with resources and connections and are just happy to share those. There were also just cold calling different prisons, and a lot of people that I spoke to, like wardens, that were just like, books like to read. And I was like, oh, they don't have any reading material for anyone in there. And it's like, yes, let me send you a list. I had a list on our indie commerce site that I would just send people, like, these are the general kind of most asked for, most commonly accepted titles, Peter Singer, Thich Nhat Hanh, some like Brandon Sanderson. And so it was working within the existing system, but then also trying to make inroads. A big thing that I realized, the most commonly requested titles are fantasy and mystery. Those, we always send out tons of those. The ones that I realized are also really in need, money management and business titles, where these incarcerated individuals want to be able to make a game plan to, once they're released, to stay out and to build back their life. A lot of self-help titles, but specifically focused on trauma and grief and substance use. And then I was thinking a lot about, anyone who is incarcerated is already invisible to our society. And then there's populations within that are even further marginalized. And so it was important to send out a lot of LGBTQ books, whether that was memoirs or just fiction with representation, Spanish titles, especially in the California prisons, or the Southwest in general. There are, high populations of Spanish speakers, and there are literally no books or materials in Spanish available to them. And large print books. There's a huge amount of elderly people who are incarcerated, and they just need large print books like anyone else would. And then also parenting books. There's a lot of parents or soon-to-be parents imprisoned, and giving them the tools, and it's important. And I really felt that being annoying and being persistent was a huge factor in, making connections with these facilities. Their voicemails are always full. They'll always send you to the warden, who will send you to the chaplain, who will send you to the librarian. And that both is and a perpetuating factor in the system. And it's just about staying visible and trying to keep these people who are incarcerated visible. So for our drive, we ended up raising about $6,500. We sent out 500 books or so. We partnered with 12 facilities, which included 2 juvenile halls and 2 women's prisons. And we went, besides California, we sent them out to Oklahoma, South Carolina, Georgia, Louisiana. We sent a huge box to Rikers. It was a really incredible response by our community, and it was just like, it was such a great experience being able to package those up and, sending them out, and staff had a great time. We sent all our staff picks, and some of our book club picks, and, just trying to broaden our community of readers more generally. And I think the biggest thing now, that we've calmed down after the holidays is sustaining this. So, we've done all this outreach and community education and organizing, and we have a base that's excited. And so it's finding ways to keep this sustainable, because obviously we didn't dismantle mass incarceration in 1 month. And people are eager for more. So some of the things that we're planning now, there's a really cool group of formerly incarcerated writers who has a zine series, and we sell zines. So we're going to do a launch with them for their next issue. We've partnered with someone who runs letter writing to inmates workshops. So we're going to bring them in, and generally we have an open donation. So still only accepting new books, but you buy a book for donation, you get 15% off your whole purchase. And as we've met more and more librarians, some in minimum security facilities or in, more temporary detention centers, can accept gently used. And so if someone has that, we can carefully look through it and accept those donations. But yeah, it's a whole world of opportunity. It's been a really great boon to not only our business, but our community programming.
Thank you for listening to Book to the Bookstore Education Podcast, brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA website at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!